Inside this box sleeps one of the craziest prehistorics, and I am now happy to be called its owner. Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. Sorry for the super dramatic intro, but I'm really pumped to have this one in my collection. There's quite the story behind this beast. It's one of the craziest tops I've ever seen. This guitar first showed up when my channel was relatively new, but we'll talk about that here in a minute. But look at the quilt top on this one, and it's from the 80s. But to be honest, I didn't buy this one just for its beauty. It's because it's always been so mysterious. This first showed up to the public about 7 years ago by Gary's Classic Guitars. In fact, it was episode 18 of the old Would You Rock or Not series that I talked about this one. And in preparation for this video, I actually reached out to Gary and said, hey, do you have any other information on who sold you that guitar or anything like that? And he told me a doctor had previously owned this one, and he sold it to Gary 15 years before he offered it for sale. So some quick math, that means Gary bought it in the early 2000s. But there's a few strange things about this one. A, you get this crazy two-piece quilted maple top. This is what dreams are made of. There's actually a few spotlights that have a very similar top to this one. I used to own one. It was number 89. But the whole thing with the spotlights is they were runoffs of Heritage Series guitars that had the tops that were just a little bit too short. So to find one that actually was big enough for the whole top is just quite fascinating. But next up, look at our serial number. It's an ink stamp with a leading 0. So when it was first advertised for sale, it was called a 1980, but then it was later revised to 1982. That's part of the mystery today. We need to figure out when this thing was made, because the fact that it has an ABR1 bridge, if it truly was a 1980, this would be crazy rare. Because this technically has full-on prehistoric specs, because that's what you need, an ABR1 bridge and an ink-stamped serial number. A little bit of prehistoric history for you. Starting in the mid to late 70s, dealers were starting to see the hype of the 59 burst. So Strings and Things was one of the first one to get Gibson to custom order something a little bit closer to their specs. And then when Gibson sees that they're doing okay with that, they come out with the Les Paul KM. It's not really a very accurate reissue, but hey, they were trying. So then you start to get other dealers like Guitar Trader getting in the mix, Leo's reissues, Norm's Rare Guitars even had one, including Jimmy Wallace, and other custom ordered one-offs being built more towards the specs of a reissue. Before eventually, and within the mix, Gibson comes out with their Heritage series, which again is a step in the right direction, but it's not perfect. Then you get the standard 82 models, and then finally, in 1983, the Prehistorics are birthed. It's where they got it good enough until the custom shop opens in late 1993, when they introduced the long neck tenon and all that other good stuff. However, there's two more anomalies about this one. It appears to have a Heritage Elites fretboard, because look, it's ebony. Well, you know what? That's what we've all been thinking, but now that I have it in person, no, that's just extra dark rosewood in my opinion. So okay, that is no longer a weird spec of this one. But what is weird is the neck. It's chunky. This is like R8 baseball bat territory of today's standard. You don't find that in the 80s. That is a weird spec for a guitar of this era, but it's nice. I dig it. About a week ago, we did an unboxing of a bunch of cool guitars, and I told you I might buy more from Jeff. Yeah, this was one of the additional ones that I had purchased from him. Now you might notice, hey, the knobs look different from Gary's photos. Why on earth do we have an Epiphone dress cover on this thing? I don't know, but I have the originals. So let's go ahead and throw this onto the workbench to take an individual look at its parts and specs and get it back to the way it was from the factory. Not gonna lie, when I first opened the case, it was not necessarily love at first sight. Here's the thing about these super ultra crazy quilt tops. They look phenomenal in photos, but then they're usually actually relatively dead in person. Now thankfully, after polishing this one up, it got some of its movement back. But it's not like a flame top where the flames will disappear and reappear somewhere else. The really heavy quilts, that pattern stays there, it's just the light dances around it a little bit. But if you got a whole bunch of gunk from years and years of being left on a stand on the guitar, the light can't play off of it. So now it's definitely come to life. I also want to point out another elephant in the room. Yeah, it's kind of a clown burst. But in person, it doesn't look like this. It's not complete red border. There is like an orange fade from here, and then it starts to red there. Camera's just oversaturated. It's not quite as clown bursty in person. But I'm very thankful that all the answers that we needed do lie in our cavities. It's a serial number, 82502085. So this tells us a lot of things. First off, it confirms 1982 production, about 2/3 through the year, 250th day. It was production number 65, but most importantly, the 0 tells us it was built in the original Kalamazoo, Michigan plant. So not only is this a really fun early prehistoric before the prehistorics came out, but it's a Kalamazoo one. Now unfortunately, they weren't toying around with like long neck tenons or anything. It's still a short neck, but there's no maple layer between the top and the body, so it is a historically constructed guitar. But you might be saying, hey Trogly, I've never seen a serial number in here. Usually it's on the back of the headstock. However, sometimes where they'll put it is right here on the edge of the control plate cavity. Those are really cool, some of my favorites. So I was hoping I would find that, but this is even better because you don't see them there that often. But sometimes what you can find in this era is the Made in USA stamp. So when I pop out the bridge pickup, I was very happy to see that in this location this time. Just stamped right up there at the top. Fun stuff. But nothing else too crazy to see in our cavities. Our pickups are the Era Correct set, Tim Shaw PAFs. I wouldn't expect anything less in here. I get readings of 7.18 k ohms in the bridge, 7.41 in the neck, and 3.65 in the middle. Typically Shaws will range from 7.1 to about 7.7. So that is correct. However, somebody did play with our pickups. Because at first you look in here and you go, yeah, those solder joints, they look good. This is completely untouched. What are you talking about, Trogly? Nothing's been modified. Look right here. So what somebody did is they sliced the original lead off so they didn't have to mess with the solder work, and then they spliced the pickup back together. So for clarity, somebody wanted to try different pickups in here, but rather than messing with the solder work on the pots, somebody sliced the original leads and installed the new pickups to that. But eventually this got restored back to the Tim Shaw PAFs, very similar to just extending your lead. So you've got the original pickup wire going onto here, being spliced back onto itself where it originally was. And you have that for the neck and bridge. That's one way not to break the original solder joints. Now in the grand scheme of things, does it really matter? No. It's the original set. If anything, I actually prefer this style rather than messing with solder joints. But sure enough, do you guys see what I'm seeing? It's a real ABR1 bridge before the prehistorics come out. So that makes your value jump significantly. Like, we're almost there, right? This is the tail end of 1982. We're ready to get into the prehistoric era. There are no Nashville bushings in this. I was talking to Randy about this guitar. He was scared that maybe somebody had just filled them in and converted it to ABR1, which was a genuine concern. But those were just additional thumb wheels that somebody put down here to prevent post lean. Here's a look at our bridge. It is an Era Correct ABR1, stock from the factory. Now, it was factory installed upside down, which just bugs me so much. So I took the time to flip the saddles so I can install it properly this time. I was quite shocked to see this. We have the larger bushings within the body for the tailpiece. I'm not exactly sure if these were also called sustain sisters, like the version that they sometimes used on the bridge. But basically, it's a larger brass insert that's supposed to, transfer better to the body. Brass was all the rage. But it sure does give a non-reissue look to this guitar. But I am fully willing to believe that is factory stock and original. And by the way, here's what it looks like without a pickguard. This is the way I first saw it. Usually I'm always a pickguard on kind of guy, even if the top is really nice. It's a shame it was drilled, but what can we do? My other decision on leaving the pickguard off is I'm not sure if this pickguard's original. Because that bracket is definitely not original. That's not the right type of screw, and you don't have the right type of backing. But the pickguard, maybe. It's also been repaired right here. It was cracked. It's got picking scratches to look the part. But check out our knobs. They did come stock with thumb bleeders. The purpose of them being to point what number you're at so you know. But there's our original knobs back on. I am deeply passionate about the 1980 through 1983 version of this knob. It's so cool. It's got that whole UFO'd skirt. It's got the gold glitter within it. Has that molasses brown top. Late 83 into 84, they start transitioning into this new style. It still has that signature molasses brown top, but it loses its skirt. It becomes fully rounded, and the color just gets a little bit darker in general. The difference is subtle to the untrained eye, but to me, these are vastly superior. I love them. We can take a second to appreciate the top here. It is very clean on the top. I noticed like a few small impressions. Nothing that I'm going to worry about. I mean, the top hides any type of blemish as long as you're not missing tons and tons of finish somewhere. This was definitely a stand baby. You've got some rash down here as well as over here, and we'll see some on the neck in a minute. But we do need to talk about the top carve. Kalamazoo, when they did the top carves, they're rather shallow in this era, but it is there. We'll kind of move the light right here. It's very flat. Like, it doesn't quite have the scoop up in this area that it should have. It just has a little bit more of an exaggerated belly before it just kind of tapers off. Another guitar that you can see that effect on was the last Kalamazoo Les Paul Custom. That's one of those guitars. Hopefully one day I can get that one back. Because you got to remember, Kalamazoo was only open for like, what, another year and a half or so at the time that this thing was produced. It was the tail end of everything. But moving on from our gorgeous maple top and mahogany body, we've got that one-piece mahogany neck, and yes, I personally still think this is a rosewood fretboard. Feel free to tell me what you think. I'm sure a lot of people are going to say ebony, but look at this footage. This is after I did my cleaning before I reconditioned the board, and you can definitely tell the more rosewood color, and as I was doing the light steel wool treatment, it was brown. But this fretboard was pretty gunky, so I mean, that also just could have been the gunk. But it has too much porous wood grain to be ebony in my opinion. Not that ebony doesn't have any grain, but I will certainly agree it gives the appearance of ebony. But check out Kalamazoo trying to be cool with the really tiny side marker inlays. The nut appears to be different than usual too, like it's a little bit more shapely. However, it appears to be original. Well, you know, now that I've said it, somebody might have just touched up the edge. We're going to have to blacklight test that. But it has some very light fretwear. Shouldn't be anything that affects things too much. But our nut measures 1.71 inches and increases to 2.06 at the 12. Get ready for this. 0.91 first fret neck depth, 1.03 by the 12th. This is an atypical neck of this era. It is seriously chunky. Without a doubt, the biggest neck that I've had on a Prehistoric or any early 80s Les Paul. So it wouldn't have surprised me if somebody custom ordered this, or it was like an employee build of like the finest woods that he kept back under his drawer. But it is measuring a 24 3/4 inch scale with a 12-inch fretboard radius. Now we move on to the headstock. Looks like one of the Heritage 80 Elite series due to the Grover tuners, but this was kind of like that hot-rodded 59 style. You want the better tuners, and the Grovers were pretty good in this era. But our truss rod is looking in perfect condition, but we have yet to transition into the Prehistoric style logo here. And here's a look at the original truss rod cover. It's just blank. Now here we go. Fresh strings, cleaned up. She's looking great now. So I told you earlier, I flipped the bridge, flipped all the saddles. Now the downside to that is those were definitely slotted for the other way, so all the strings are like slightly askew. So if it looks like the neck is off, nah, it's just because I don't want to mess around with those. If somebody wanted to return it to how we've all seen it before, it's easy enough to do. I did the hard work getting those things out. They were so crusted in there. Like, I can't even turn some of these screws. They were so bad. But this bridge really isn't high enough in the air to need that second thumb wheel set, so I decided to remove those. It's possible they were added after the factory anyway. But this now looks correct and awesome in my eyes. But now we can move on over to the backside. This is a one-piece body, but that's not really anything special in this era. Most of them were. However, for this era, this feels extra light, so I think they chose premium mahogany for it. You've got some cool mineral streak lines over here, and some more right there. But it does indeed have the proper thin binding in the cutaway. We can run along the other edges so you can see some of the other light nicks and dings. But we have the correct plastic output jack plate. In full disclosure, the neck strap button is replaced. That's a modern one that I put on there, as it came to me with a Schaller, but yet an original style one in the bridge, so I don't know if he lost the original. But we've got kind of a nasty ding here over on the edge. And some other finish breaking stuff. And a couple of dings here. But check out your neck heel. Very square. I guess it makes sense because the neck is ultra chunky. So what you're seeing here is a very light impression on the neck, and then some superficial stand rash. Then we get to the headstock. You can see the wings glued on, the backside of the USA made Grovers, and then oof! So the guy I got this from, he has a large collection, and he says he plays like 3 different ones every day to cycle through them all, and he has them all hung up on his wall. He enjoys them, and he plays them. I think he told me it takes him 8 months to go through the whole cycle. But at some point in time, between taking things down, moving it around, that is a new ding from Gary's photos. So sometime in the past 6 years, it got dinged up. But now, what is the serial number? So if we read it like a reissue, it'd be a 1960 reissue. But we've got a giant neck, so that can't be right. I could see why somebody would have thought 1980, but we know that's not right because of the traditional serial number, making it an 82. So my best guess, this has to be like an anniversary date, it'd be someone's birthday, you know, like October of 1952, and they just put a 0 just to have a digit. And I talked to Randy about some guitars, and he even has some in his ledgers that have random 5-digit ink stamp serial ones that he built in Nashville. So these did happen. And short of finding the original owner, unfortunately, it just has to remain a mystery. While we're back here, let's take another look at our control cavity. Surprisingly, all the pots date to 1980. So I would imagine that would lead to somebody thinking, oh yeah, this one must have been made in 1980. But no, it was just old parts being used up. Or maybe it started building in 80 and didn't get finished until much later. But another part of being a prehistoric, you have to have your brown back plates. And we're good on that. And here's our toggle switch cavity. Everything's looking good here. And here's a look at our original brown plate. But actually, one more thing about back here. I was shocked to see this. Usually the prehistorics have moved on from these shielding trays. But no, sure enough, this one was not drilled for a ground wire. So rather non-prehistoric-like, but it has the 2 main important features, the ABR1 and ink stamp serial number. So we'll give it a pass. Now it's time for that ever so important blacklight test. The cherry sunburst is so strong you can still see it through all the glowing. But everything is looking perfectly fine on this top. Knobs are glowing the way I'd want to see. Face of the headstock is also looking fine. However, there is a unique circle pattern right there. I wonder if that's a long time ago touch-up. But moving on to the back, no surprises here. Edges are looking fine. Neck joint's good. Couple of nicks and dings. And of course the aforementioned super ultra stand rash. But there's actually a lot more visible than you could even see. They used a whole bunch of different stands. This must have been one of those nasty rubber ones. The other ones are invisible to the naked eye. And as far as the nut goes, it looks convincing on this side. However, the lacquer is broke and chipped along this side, so it looks like the nut has come off. I'm gonna say that one's been replaced, but it was expertly redone. Our headstock's looking fine outside of that one bruise up there. But all said and done, how much does this one weigh? I'm actually shocked. 9 pounds, 12.8. I thought for sure it was going to be a little bit lighter than that because it doesn't really feel that bad. Let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear how this one sounds. First things first, this has to be one of the most resonant guitars I've ever played. My hand is literally tingly numb from the vibrations transferring through the body to the neck. It's almost a bad thing. we go, my new 1982 Kalamazoo Prehistoric Les Paul, before the Prehistorics were exactly a thing. I'd say the best way to describe this one in Gibson aficionado terms is it's like a standard 82, but just stepped up a notch to get it a little bit closer to reissue specs, but still not quite as accurate as a current day R9. It's got a great top. It's ridiculously resonant, like almost to the point where it's a bad thing. And as far as the tones go, yeah, it's good. Nice Tim Shaw PAF style stuff. But my favorite thing has to be the neck profile. I love the 80s Les Pauls, but I do personally prefer something a little bit larger. So this is exactly what I've always wanted on like a Spotlight special or something. So it's very cool to finally have something of that era that just happens to have a freak of a giant neck with crazy top and all those other good things that we talked about today. If you're interested in being the next owner of this one, sorry, it's not for sale. This is what I love collecting. Because it used to be popular to dog on the Norland era of Gibson and say, those ones are inferior. So I love collecting the particularly special, awesome examples that were birthed during that time period just to prove people wrong and help them understand that there's great and bad guitars in every era of Gibson. And maybe they should approach them with a slightly more open mind. All right, Troglodytes, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll catch you tomorrow on the next one. Take care. If you enjoyed this one, you'd probably like that last Kalamazoo custom as well. It's an older video, but still a great one.